He packed the kids' bags before sunrise, said she was a good mom, then called her boring and walked out. Have you ever given someone everything, only for them to look you in the face like you were just wallpaper? Have you ever spent years building someone's dreams only to be left behind when the spotlight came? What happens when a quiet woman finally stops shrinking? Stay with us, because this story, it's not about revenge, it's about rebirth. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, where we tell raw, emotional American love stories that aren't just entertaining, they mean something. If you believe in real love, healing after heartbreak, and second chances that matter, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment as the story unfolds. Someone out there needs this one. Now, let's begin. Narina Vale was never loud. She didn't own bright lipstick. She didn't walk into rooms to be noticed. She wasn't the type who made bold entrances or talked over anyone. But if you sat across from her long enough, you'd notice her quiet strength, warm hazel eyes, a calm that settled everything around her, grace without the need for attention. At 34, Narina's world looked picture perfect from the outside. A well-kept home, 2 beautiful kids, and a husband on magazine covers. She made school lunches with handwritten notes, read bedtime stories in silly voices, and always kept a fresh candle burning in the entryway. Behind that quiet rhythm was 10 years of devotion. She raised their children while managing every piece of the home, the schedules, the bills, the emotional labor. She built the foundation Cassian Law stood on while building his name in the tech industry. But Cassian wasn't the same man anymore. Not since his company landed its 3rd funding round. Not since reporters started calling him the architect of American cloud mobility. And Narina, she became invisible in the same home she once ran like a heartbeat. Cassian worked late, then later. Then he stopped pretending it was for work. He was always in a meeting even on Sundays. His phone became his shadow. His compliments dried up. His eyes looked past her like she was no longer part of the frame. She tried to talk. He nodded, but never heard her. He kissed her cheek, but never looked into her eyes. Their marriage wasn't cold. It was hollow. Still, Narina stayed. For the kids, for the vows, for the hope that the man she once knew might still be in there. Somewhere. When they first met, Cassian wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't even close. He was working out of coffee shops in downtown Atlanta, pitching clients who barely responded to his cold emails. His suits were cheap but clean. His ideas were bold but unproven. And his eyes burned with a kind of hunger she hadn't seen before. He told her, "I'm going to change how the world moves." She smiled and said, "Then make sure you don't forget how to stay still." He laughed, called her his compass, and she believed him. Narina supported him through it all. Bad deals, sleepless nights, missed holidays. She saved what she could from her freelance jobs to help him float. She was there for his first win, his first check, his first feature in a local paper. And when they finally moved into the quiet suburb with the 3-level townhouse, she breathed for the first time in years. Or so she thought. Things changed slowly. Then, all at once. Cassian hired an assistant, then 2. His office became invite-only. His wardrobe went from practical to polished. His language changed too. Everything became about image, metrics, expansion. And Narina, she became a shadow, a soft voice behind the door, the mother of his children, the keeper of the home. But not the woman he desired. She noticed it first in the way he stopped laughing. Then in how he stopped touching her. Then in how he left the room while she was still talking. Still, she didn't fall apart. Narina wasn't built to beg. She did what she always did, showed up. For the kids, for the family, for the man she once called her best friend. Until one morning, he packed the kids' backpacks himself. It was a Thursday, overcast. The kettle was still warm from tea. Narina was standing in the kitchen, barefoot, folding a small towel when she heard drawers opening. Fast, intentional. Cassian came down the stairs in a steel grey suit, tie loose, sleeves rolled. He looked calm, too calm. He moved through the house like he didn't live there anymore. "Where are you going?" Narina asked quietly. He didn't look up. "I think we both know you're not enough for me anymore." Her breath caught. Cassian zipped the kids' bags. Their toothbrushes, pajamas, favorite plush toys. "You're a good mom," he added, finally meeting her eyes. "But you're boring." That was it. No fight, no tears, no last hug. He kissed their daughter on the cheek, tapped their son's nose, then turned the knob. The door shut behind him, like a sentence she didn't finish reading. She didn't scream, didn't cry, not right away. She stood in the living room, watching the light shift across the floorboards. The silence in the walls heavier than anything she'd ever carried. Hours passed. She didn't move. At some point, she sat down, and the house, once filled with bedtime songs and small footsteps, felt like a museum. Cold, untouched, days blurred. She washed the same mug every morning, made 2 fewer plates of food, folded clothes she didn't remember wearing. The couch still had a dent from where her daughter used to curl up. The bathroom smelled like her son's shampoo. The closet still held his shirts, but he was gone, and she was alone. The days after Cassian left moved slowly. Narina didn't post on social media. She didn't call her friends. She didn't tell her parents. She just existed. The only sounds in the house were the heater kicking on and the occasional buzz of her phone. She didn't check the notifications. Sometimes she'd open the door to the kids' room and stare at their unmade beds. She didn't have the heart to straighten them. The little sock under the dresser, the purple crayon cap in the corner, a half-drawn picture taped to the wall, a stick figure family of 4. She left everything exactly as it was. When she missed their voices too much, she'd press play on an old video on her phone, one where her daughter shouted, "Mommy, I made spaghetti in the sandbox," and her son tried to eat it. Narina would smile, then cry, then sit in the quiet again. Some mornings, she'd forget they were gone. She'd reach for 2 extra juice boxes, pull out their lunch boxes before realizing they weren't there. That was the worst part. Not the heartbreak, but the muscle memory. It wasn't heartbreak that haunted her. It was routine. Her body still remembered how to care for them, how to time bedtime, how to braid hair and tie little shoes. But now, there were no shoes to tie, no giggles in the bath, no questions about dinosaurs and colors, just silence. The news broke 2 weeks later. Cassian Law was photographed at a yacht party in Miami, holding hands with Kylara Bray, a fashion entrepreneur with over 5 million followers. She was stunning, tall, caramel-toned, always camera-ready. Her Instagram feed was filled with filters, designer clothes and brand deals. Every picture felt like a campaign. Perfect lighting, perfect captions, perfect timing. Headlines followed. Cassian Law's new flame, meet the stylish CEO dating tech's golden boy, the fire to his steel power couple alert. Cassian and Kylara take over Miami. They became the talk of every podcast. A public relations dream. Young, ambitious, beautiful, marketable. Kylara posted a story laughing on the beach with Cassian in the background pouring champagne. Another showed her sitting on his lap at an outdoor restaurant, tagging a luxury watch brand. Their relationship moved fast, too fast, but no one questioned it. No one asked what happened to the quiet woman who once stood beside him. No one mentioned the 2 children he took. No one wondered where Narina had gone. She wasn't part of the story anymore. She was a footnote. Narina moved out of the townhouse 2 weeks later. She couldn't bear the echo in the rooms. Every corner held a memory she didn't choose. She found a small rental apartment on the edge of the city. 2 bedrooms, faded tiles, a leaky sink, but it was hers. She didn't bring much, just clothes, her laptop, and the kids' artwork she took down before leaving. Her lawyer said the custody arrangement would be reviewed in court, but for now, the kids stayed with Cassian. He had the means, the resources, and the public image. Narina had a name they no longer said. Sometimes she sat on the floor of her apartment with a mug of tea that had gone cold and stared at nothing. She felt like a ghost in her own life. It wasn't anger that woke her, or even grief. It was her reflection. One afternoon, she walked past the mirror in the hallway and froze. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her skin looked dull. Her eyes tired. Her frame had thinned. She looked older than she remembered, not in years but in energy. Her shoulders slumped inward, like her body was trying to disappear. She blinked at her reflection, then whispered, "Where did you go?" That question stayed with her all night. The next morning, she opened her laptop. It was the first time in months she touched it for herself. The screen glowed, and her desktop loaded. A mix of forgotten documents and old folders. She scrolled until she saw one marked Nestle Top Prototype. She hadn't thought about it in years. Before she became a full-time mother, Narina had studied digital product design. UX and UI had always fascinated her. Clean interfaces, systems that made life easier. She had once been the top student in her class, winning awards for elegant, intuitive design. Nestle was her passion project, an app that helped working mothers organize their daily routines, from meal plans to school runs to home budgets. She had sketched it during naps and late nights, designed wireframes, even pitched it to 2 friends before life pulled her in other directions. Back then, no one took it seriously. She was too busy raising babies and being the silent partner to a man chasing funding. But here it was, still sitting in her hard drive, unfinished but untouched. She clicked it open. The logo was still there, a simple bird's nest wrapped around a clock, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something. Not rage, not revenge, hope. She didn't wait. Narina spent the next 4 hours organizing her files, cleaning up the design, and sketching out a plan. She created a new login for a tech community she used to be part of, started following female founder forums, downloaded tools, updated her software, joined Discord groups, subscribed to newsletters. By sunset, she was scribbling notes on sticky pads, her fingers moving faster than they had in years. She didn't know exactly where she was headed, but she was finally moving. Not for anyone else, not for an image, not to prove a point. For herself. She worked like a woman with something to prove, but not to Cassian. She worked to prove to herself that she was still here, still capable, still brilliant. Late nights became early mornings. Her apartment stayed dim, lit mostly by the screen and the soft glow of a floor lamp she refused to replace. She drank coffee she never finished and skipped meals by accident. She wasn't chasing glory. She was building something that once mattered to her, and still did. It wasn't loud work. It was quiet, steady, focused, much like her. Narina didn't tell anyone what she was working on, not even her sister when they caught up over the phone. "You sound better," her sister had said one evening. "Lighter, maybe." Narina smiled faintly, twirling her teaspoon. Just keeping busy. And she was. In the quiet hours of the morning and the dim stretch of night, she was designing again, writing user flows, updating color palettes, reading about back-end tools she used to understand in her sleep, but now had to relearn from scratch. She posted anonymously on founder forums under the name NRV. She joined weekly pitch nights over Zoom and muted herself the entire time, listening closely to how other women spoke about their ideas, how they answered questions, how they presented confidence, even when they stumbled. She noticed something. The most successful ones weren't always the loudest. They were the clearest, the most consistent. That gave her confidence. It took 6 weeks to build a basic prototype of the app. Nestle was simple by design. A dashboard that showed a weekly planner, meals, school drop-offs, reminders, even a button to share the load with a partner. She added a quiet time tracker, inspired by the 20 stolen minutes she used to crave while the kids napped. She didn't have developers or a team. She had YouTube tutorials, online courses, and sheer determination. What she lacked in Polish, she made up for in focus. At one point, She only left her apartment for groceries. The rest of her world existed between pixels and sticky notes. And she liked it that way. Then came the break. It started with a message on a mom-focused Facebook group she'd quietly joined weeks earlier. A member had asked, "Anyone found a way to juggle school, pick-up, meals and side hustles without losing your mind?" Narina replied in a single comment, "I've been working on something that might help. It's not finished, but it's free to try." She attached a link to her Nestle prototype. That night, 24 people clicked it. By morning, the number was over 200. One user, a popular mom content creator, posted a screen recording of Nestle on her TikTok, saying, "Okay, this is brilliant. Who made this?" Her video crossed 100,000 views in 3 days. Narina sat at her desk, watching the numbers climb. Her hands trembled as she opened her inbox. Messages poured in. "Is this available on iOS? Can I share this with my friends? Do you offer paid plans?" She couldn't breathe. Then she laughed, a soft, cracked sound she hadn't heard from herself in months. Not because she'd gone viral, but because, for the first time since her life fell apart, something she made mattered again. She didn't hesitate. That same day, she reached out to a freelance developer she found through a platform she used in college. His name was Denny, young, responsive, humble. He loved the app's mission. They agreed to split tasks. Narina would handle all design, structure, and user testing. Denny would manage integration and back-end logic. He asked, "Are you running this alone?" She answered, "For now." Nestle too went live in under 4 weeks. This version looked sharper, cleaner, and had a polished onboarding experience. Narina built a landing page with a soft lavender theme and a voiceover video made from stitched-together audio samples. She didn't show her face. She didn't use her name. It wasn't about her. It was about the moms, the women who used to feel invisible, just like she had. The women who needed something small to make life lighter. She knew them. She had been them, and now she was building for them. The second wave hit harder. The TikTok creator followed up with a longer video, walking through her favorite features. Then a newsletter for working moms featured Nestle in its 5 Smart Tools This Week segment. Then a YouTuber who focused on productivity made a video saying, "This app has something most tools don't. Care built into every screen." The site crashed twice that week from traffic spikes. Denny worked around the clock to keep it live. Narina didn't sleep much either. She answered every email, every bug report, every suggestion. Her days were long. But this time, she wasn't exhausted. She was electrified. The sign-ups crossed 25,000 in 3 days, then 50,000 the next week. People began tagging Nestle on Instagram, even though there was no official account yet. A few blogs tried to track down the creator, but came up short. They called it the mystery app that moms are obsessed with. Narina didn't correct them. Not yet. She was too busy watching something she once abandoned come alive. Denny suggested applying to a startup incubator based in Austin, one known for supporting female-led tech companies. "I'll apply under my name if you're not ready," he told her. But she was. She filled out the application, this time using her real name, Narina Val. It felt strange at first, seeing her name tied to something bold again. But she submitted it. She didn't tell anyone. And 3 weeks later, an email came in. "Congratulations. Nestle has been selected for our Spring Accelerator. Welcome aboard." The offer included capital, mentorship, and a chance to pitch to major investors by the end of the program. Narina sat in her apartment, phone in her lap, staring at the screen. She whispered the words aloud, slowly, like they were a foreign language. "I did it." The accelerator program changed everything. Twice a week, Narina logged into video calls with advisors, mentors, and fellow founders. The others introduced themselves with practiced confidence, polished pitches, sharp taglines, well-lit camera setups. Narina sat at her kitchen counter, soft lighting from a desk lamp, her laptop balanced on a stack of books. No background blur, no filters, just her. At first, she barely spoke. She listened. She took notes on everything, how they talked about growth, how they framed their metrics, how they wove storytelling into data. Every session, she came away sharper. Her mentor, a former VC-turned-founder, noticed. "You don't say much," she told Narina during a private session. "I'm watching," Narina replied. The woman smiled. "Good. Just don't forget. Sometimes the quiet ones hit the hardest when they finally speak." Narina remembered that. By week 3, Nestlé had over 120,000 active users. Denny rebuilt the back end to support the scale. They hired a part-time community manager to handle support tickets and social engagement. Narina, still anonymous online, began dropping thoughtful comments under user posts, helping one person at a time. She still hadn't done interviews, still hadn't posted a founder photo. Her face wasn't part of the brand, but her fingerprints were on everything. The app now featured guided routines, visual schedules, and a simple feature that let users share checklists. With a CO parent, something she'd once begged Cassian to remember during his travel weeks. She knew what real moms needed, not features for clicks, but functions that eased the load without fanfare. That's why people stayed. Investor inquiries poured in. Most came through the accelerator. A few came from cold outreach, VC firms, angel investors, media incubators. People wanted to meet the woman behind Nestlé. The mystery made her more magnetic. At first, she hesitated. Her voice still carried the memory of being dismissed. But one afternoon, she received a calendar link from Lennox Reeve, a clean tech entrepreneur turned impact investor. The email was short, respectful, and didn't include buzzwords or pressure. She booked the call. Lennox appeared on screen in a black crewneck. Bookcases behind him, not trophies, no ego, just focus. "I've been following your growth curve," he said, "and more importantly, your retention numbers. People aren't just downloading Nestlé, they're using it. That tells me you're solving a real pain point." Narina nodded. "That's the goal. I'd like to hear what your long-term vision is. Not your pitch. Just, where do you want this to go?" She paused. It was the first time someone asked what she wanted, not what the numbers projected. She spoke slowly but clearly. "I want to build something that stays useful even after it stops trending. I want moms to feel supported, like their time matters, like they matter." Lennox nodded. "Smart," he said, "and rare." They spoke for nearly an hour. At the end, he said, "I'm not here to chase headlines. I'm here to back founders who've lived the problem they're solving. You're not guessing. You know, I'm in." The investment closed within 2 weeks. It wasn't a controlling stake. Narina made sure of that. She held majority equity, took advice, not orders. With funding secured, they expanded, hired a full-time CTO, brought on a UX researcher, added 2 engineers and a small marketing team. Nestlé moved from a rented server to a dedicated stack. Still, Narina worked from her apartment. Even with money, she didn't change her surroundings. Not yet. She spent most days in sweatshirts and slippers, standing at the counter while user testing calls played through her earbuds. The growth didn't intoxicate her. It sobered her. Because she knew what it felt like to have something you love disappear overnight. When the Series A round opened, they were oversubscribed in 72 hours. Nestlé hit a $75 million valuation before the end of the quarter. Narina didn't flinch. At $125 million, press started circling. At $250 million, headlines followed. Quiet genius behind Nestlé steps into spotlight from stay-at-home mom to CEO. Narina Vale rewrites the rules. A Forbes article used a photo of her standing against a pale wall in a grey dress, arms relaxed, head slightly tilted. The caption read, "Soft power. Sharp mind." She didn't love the attention, but she understood it. And she handled it like everything else in her life, with care, not noise. One afternoon, her sister came to visit. They sat on the balcony of Narina's new apartment, a modest but sunlit space closer to downtown. The kids' room was ready, waiting for a custody review that had finally been scheduled. Her sister looked at her, really looked. "You don't even move the same," she said. Narina smiled. "What do you mean? You used to fold in. Now you take up space." "In a good way." Narina exhaled. Took a while. Her sister leaned over and kissed her forehead. "I'm proud of you. But mostly, I'm glad you're back." Narina didn't answer. She just sat still and felt seen. Have you ever been counted out, only to rise higher than they ever imagined? Tell us in the comments. Your comeback might inspire someone else to keep going. And if Narina's quiet rise moved you, don't scroll without liking this video. Subscribe now, because her story isn't finished yet, not even close. Cassian Law sat at the end of a long conference table in San Francisco, flipping through quarterly reports. Numbers were solid. Revenue was up. His board was pleased. But he wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on a headline at the bottom of the screen on the wall. Female-founded app, Nestle hits $250 million valuation, focused on simplifying motherhood. He frowned. Something about the name tugged at a thread in his memory. He clicked into the article after the meeting. There wasn't much, just speculation, download stats, and glowing testimonials from moms praising how Nestle understood what they needed before they could explain it. No founder quotes, no photos, just praise. Cassian scrolled halfway through the article when he froze. The name. Founder. Narina Vale. His heart knocked once, hard. He sat still. The photo was grainy, a candid press shot, but it was unmistakable. The woman standing in front of a pale wall, arms relaxed, wearing a simple grey dress. Narina. He didn't recognize the expression on her face. She looked calm, collected, like she didn't need the room's approval. And suddenly, Cassian felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Small. He told himself it wasn't jealousy. That wasn't the word. He was doing well. His company had closed another international deal. He was booked for 3 panels next month and prepping for a major product launch. He was with Kailara, a partner who looked perfect on paper and never missed a photo op. But that night, when he got home to their high-rise apartment, he didn't mention what he saw. He poured himself a drink, sat on the balcony alone, and stared at nothing. Kailara walked in after an event and kissed his cheek without looking up from her phone. "You good?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. Too fast. He didn't sleep that night. His mind kept circling the same question. How? How had she gone from packing lunchboxes to building a tech empire? How had he missed it? Narina didn't know Cassian had seen the article. She was busy finalizing the new Nestle update with her product team, a family-sharing feature that allowed divorced or separated CO parents to coordinate schedules respectfully and without passive-aggressive notes. It was one of the most requested updates. She knew why. That week, her lawyer called with good news. The family court had scheduled their custody hearing. The judge agreed to review the original arrangement due to a substantial change in life circumstances. Narina met the call with a quiet nod. She didn't celebrate. Not yet. There was still so much to prepare. But that night, she stood in her children's room, the one she'd built again from scratch, and stared at the tiny twin beds, freshly made with soft blankets and printed pillows. And for the first time in almost a year, she whispered out loud, "Come home." The next few weeks were uncomfortable for Cassian in a way he couldn't explain. He wasn't used to being the one watching from the sidelines. But now, everywhere he turned, there was Nestle. A new ad campaign showed soft visuals of mothers gently organizing their lives on screen, not flashy, not loud, but deeply human. The app wasn't selling glamour. It was selling peace. And people were buying it. Cassian saw another headline one morning while scrolling through LinkedIn during a flight delay, how one woman quietly reshaped tech for mothers and why Silicon Valley is watching. He tapped on the article. It opened with a description of the founder's soft leadership style, calm but commanding, one investor had said. Cassian's jaw clenched when he read that. Another quote followed. "She doesn't interrupt, but when she talks, the room goes quiet." That's who Nerina had become. He stared out the plane window for a long time. He didn't bring it up to anyone. Not to his assistant. Not to Kylara. But the headlines kept coming. They weren't about hype or viral moments. They were about consistency, integrity, real value. And Nerina's name kept appearing with the kind of weight that couldn't be faked. One magazine cover even had a tagline that made his stomach turn. The billion-dollar brain you never saw coming. He read every word. And when he reached the end, he realized something that shook him more than jealousy. She hadn't mentioned him. Not once. No bitter quote. No subtle reference. It was like he didn't exist in her story at all. Meanwhile, Nerina stayed focused. She reviewed the court documents quietly. Her lawyer guided her through what to expect. The custody modification process was detailed, but not hostile. They weren't going in with rage. They were going in with facts. Nerina had built a stable, safe, loving home. She was now financially secure. She had the time, the resources, and most importantly, the heart. She didn't want to take the kids away from Cassian. She wanted balance, fairness, time, and she knew she could fight for that without tearing anything down. She didn't need revenge. She needed her children to know she didn't disappear. At Nestle, the team was scaling. The app had been downloaded in 47 states. They were beta testing language options to go international, and Nerina had just approved their first educational grant, a small program, offering free Nestle Pro access to low-income mothers for a year. Her inbox was full every morning, but she still answered messages herself when she could, especially ones from users who sounded like they were hanging by a thread. One woman wrote, "I haven't felt seen in years. Your app made me feel like I had a teammate again. Thank you." Nerina sat with that message for a long time. This wasn't just business. It was restoration. Cassian showed Kylara one of the Nestle ads one evening, playing it off like curiosity. Kylara squinted at the screen. "Oh, this app. It's everywhere right now. You've used it?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not really my thing. But some of the moms on my beauty team love it." "Why?" He shrugged. "Just interesting model." She looked at him, brow lifted. "Something bothering you?" "No, just watching." She went back to her phone. He stared at the paused screen. The ad showed a woman with her hair tied up, sitting at a kitchen table, organizing her week. No makeup, no lighting tricks. Just real. He remembered mornings like that with Nerina, back before everything changed. It was still dark when Nerina stepped out of the car. The courthouse stood ahead like a stone monument, familiar and cold. The early morning fog clung to the ground as she adjusted the collar of her coat. She didn't rush. She didn't tremble. She took one steady breath and walked forward. Inside, the lights hummed. Her heels echoed across the marble floor as she moved through security. She wore no jewelry, no designer bag, just a dark green pantsuit, her hair pulled into a neat low bun, and a quiet look that said, "I didn't come here to prove anything. I came to be heard." Her lawyer greeted her with a folder and a soft nod. "You ready?" Nerina met her eyes. "I've been ready." Cassian arrived 15 minutes later. He was in a tailored navy suit, sharp and crisp as ever. His lawyer, a man with a reputation for winning, flanked him like armor. Cassian scanned the courtroom once before spotting her. She didn't flinch when their eyes met. He expected a reaction. A flicker, a pause. But Nerina simply nodded once, then looked away. It landed harder than silence. He sat down beside his attorney, adjusting his cuffs, though they didn't need adjusting. Kylara wasn't with him. He hadn't asked her to come. Something about this day didn't feel like hers to witness. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp focus. She looked over both parties, then spoke in a calm, measured tone. "Let's begin." The hearing moved fast. Timelines, custody details, living arrangements. Nerina listened carefully, responding only when addressed. Her voice was clear, calm. Not once did she raise it. Not once did she interrupt. When asked why she was petitioning for shared custody, She didn't recite a speech. She simply said, "Because I'm their mother." And I never stopped being that, even when they weren't with me. The room stilled. Even the clerk looked up for a second. Cassian's team tried to keep the tone professional, pointing to stability, resources, consistency. They brought up Narina's absence during the initial separation, her sudden move, her lack of social presence in the children's lives for several months. But she countered without malice. "I wasn't absent," she said. "I was rebuilding. I made sure they were safe while I healed. And now I've created a home where they are not only welcome, they are prioritized." Her words were soft, but they hit with weight. Even Cassian shifted in his seat. He'd never heard her speak this way before. The judge asked about her career change. Her lawyer passed forward documentation, growth charts, funding rounds, media features. "I run a company that supports mothers," Narina explained, not bragging, not minimizing. "I lead a team. I also work from home. I've structured my time so that I can do both well." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And you've done this in under a year?" Narina nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." There was no pride in her tone, only truth. Cassian stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. When the hearing broke for lunch, Cassian followed Narina into the hallway. She didn't stop walking. "Narina," he called. She turned, but not fully. "Yes? You really built all that? From scratch?" She paused, tilted her head slightly. "No, Cassian," she said. "Not from scratch. From survival." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away. He stood there, alone in a hallway where he used to feel untouchable. And for the first time, the silence didn't protect him. It exposed him. The afternoon session moved slower. The courtroom had thinned. The air was cooler now, less tense, but still charged. Cassian's attorney pressed a little harder, listing structured routines at his residence, a nanny on call, after-school programs, enrichment tutors. He spoke with polish, controlled, measured. But it was Narina's life that sounded fuller. Her lawyer kept it simple. No frills, no emotional performances. They laid out schedules, documentation, professional statements. Her apartment wasn't as large, but it was warm. Her calendar wasn't as rigid, but it was intentional. Her time wasn't divided between press tours and panels. It was focused, home first, business second. The difference was clear. Cassian's structure was built for performance. Narina's was built for presence. When it was time for closing remarks, Narina stood. She didn't hold paper. She didn't rehearse. She folded her hands lightly and said, "My children have two parents. One gave them comfort, meals and morning hugs. The other gave them stability, options and education. They need both." She took a small breath and added, "But I never stopped being their home. Not when I was quiet, not when I was rebuilding, and not now." Then she sat back down. No tears, no show, just peace. The judge took a 10-minute recess before returning. Cassian sat still, arms resting on the table. Narina barely blinked. When the judge entered again, she looked between them, thoughtful. "This is not a case of neglect nor conflict," she said. "This is a case of timing and transformation." She paused. "The court acknowledges both parties have provided safe, supportive environments. However, the petitioner's change in circumstance, supported by evidence, shows clear readiness and stability." Cassian's fingers curled slightly on the desk. The judge continued, "Effective immediately, legal and physical custody of the children shall be shared. A balanced schedule will be drafted and agreed upon by both parties before end of week. All previous limitations are lifted." There was silence, no clapping, no gasps. But inside Narina's chest, something exhaled, something that had been holding its breath for a long time. Outside, she stepped into the sun without speaking. Her lawyer gave her a soft smile. "Well done." "Thank you," Narina said, tucking her hands into her coat pockets. Cassian followed, slower. She heard his footsteps behind her, but didn't turn. When he reached her, he stood beside her quietly, both of them staring at the parked cars across the street. "I never thought I'd see this version of you," he said. She didn't smile. I was always here, she answered. You just stopped looking. He nodded slowly. You're impressive. She didn't need the compliment. I'm complete, she said instead. Then she walked to her car and drove home to make dinner for her kids. The doorbell rang just after 4. Narina stood in the middle of the living room, hands still slightly damp from drying the last glass in the sink. The apartment smelled faintly of baked chicken, soft vanilla, and lemon soap. She hadn't filled the space with toys or noise. She had filled it with peace. She opened the door, and there they were, her daughter in a red sweater and mismatched socks, clutching a drawing in one hand and a small backpack in the other. Her son, taller than the last time, wearing his favorite blue hoodie, and holding a half-zipped suitcase that rolled awkwardly behind him. For a second, no one moved. Then her daughter ran into her arms without a word. Narina knelt, wrapped her close, held her tight. Her son followed, pressing into her shoulder with a weight that felt both familiar and brand new. It was silent for a beat. Then her daughter whispered, "I missed your smell." Narina smiled into her hair, eyes full but steady. "I missed everything about you." That first evening was quiet. No big gestures, no grand speeches. She had their favorite plates set out. The same small cups, the cloth napkins they once used on pretend picnic nights. They sat around the table as if no time had passed, but everything had changed. "Is it okay if we sleep in the same room tonight?" her daughter asked. "Of course," Narina said, "even if we're too big." "You're never too big to feel safe." Her son looked up, his voice soft. "Can we make pancakes in the morning?" Narina nodded. "With whipped cream?" He smiled, a shy, half-formed grin that pulled at her heart. Later, they brushed their teeth while she sat on the bathroom floor, humming quietly. They giggled at toothpaste bubbles. Her daughter dropped water on her shirt and shrieked, "Mom, you forgot towels again." Narina laughed. "I didn't forget. I was just testing your memory." When they curled into bed, both in the same twin mattress pushed against the wall, she pulled the blankets over their shoulders, kissed their foreheads, and lingered. "Do you want the nightlight on?" she asked. "No," her son said. "It's not scary here." That's when she let the tears fall. Silent, soft, cleansing. In the hallway, she leaned against the doorframe and exhaled for the first time in days. She didn't reach for her phone, didn't check emails, didn't think about court or Cassian or timelines, just stood still in the place she created. Home. It didn't matter how much money Nestle was worth. It didn't matter who followed her or what articles were written. This moment, this warmth, this closeness, this stillness, was the only metric that ever mattered. The next morning started slow. No alarms, no meetings, no rush. The kids woke up before her, giggling from the kitchen. Narina slid out of bed, wrapped herself in a robe, and found them trying to open the pancake mix without causing a disaster. Her daughter looked up, grinning. "We're making breakfast." Her son added, "Well, almost." Narina laughed, took the bowl gently and said, "How about a team effort?" The kitchen smelled like vanilla and syrup within the hour. There was flour on the floor, berries on the counter, music playing softly from a phone speaker. It wasn't perfect, but it was full. Later that day, Narina took a long walk with them through the neighborhood. They stopped at the corner bakery for cinnamon rolls. She pointed out where the school bus would now stop. The kids took turns holding her hand. It was small, simple, exactly enough. When they got home, she helped with homework, took a call from her product manager, then sat beside her son on the living room rug while her daughter painted her nails with glitter polish. This was her new rhythm. Work, kids, peace, no performance, no audience, no second-guessing. That evening, Narina joined a virtual panel, her first one in weeks. A quiet interview with 3 other female founders about burnout, motherhood, and leadership. One question stood out. How do you balance it all? Narina paused, thoughtful. I don't, she said. I stopped trying to be balanced and started being present. The chat flooded with comments. Afterward, she received messages from women around the country, not thanking her for the product, but for the honesty. That's when she knew. Her voice had power now, not just the app, not just the brand, her. Across the city, Cassian scrolled through a post about the panel. Narina's name trended again, this time not for valuation, but for her words. I stopped trying to be balanced and started being present. The quote was everywhere. He sat in his office, laptop open, noise around him, staff walking, notifications pinging, but none of it registered. He closed the screen. Kailara walked in. "You look like you're miles away." He blinked. "I'm fine." She raised a brow but didn't press. Instead, she launched into updates about a press kit, an investor brunch, and a fashion collab. Cassian nodded, but his mind stayed somewhere else. Not backward, not forward, just missing. Narina didn't notice the shift in him. She was too busy living, not rebuilding, not recovering, just living. Her days with the kids became routine. School runs, grocery stops, silly conversations. Nestle was stable now, run by a team that respected her boundaries. She started sleeping again. She started reading again. She took one afternoon off just to sit in the sun, her phone on silent, a book in her lap, and her kids playing quietly nearby. The kind of afternoon she used to dream about but never claimed. She wasn't chasing healing anymore. She was walking in it. Cassian Law wasn't used to losing sleep. He had spent years mastering control over time, over people, over results. His mornings were regimented, his calendar airtight. Every call, every move, every photo taken was calculated. But lately, he was waking before his alarm, not energized, not ready to conquer the day, just still. And when his feet touched the floor each morning, the first thing he thought about, before his company, before the headlines, was Narina, not the version he remembered, not the quiet wife with tea in her hand and a soft voice fading behind his schedule. The woman in his mind now stood tall in investor roundups. She led board meetings. She wrote things people quoted. She walked into court and left him speechless. She was no longer a page in his story. She was the headline of her own. The whispers had started weeks ago. First in investor groups, where someone mentioned her name at a cocktail mixer and someone else added, "That's his ex, you know, the one he left." Cassian had overheard that from across the room. He didn't interrupt. Then it popped up on Twitter, a trending thread that started as praise for Nestle's UI and morphed into a quiet, pointed conversation about what men miss when they chase noise over substance. The thread ended with a photo of Narina smiling gently at a panel, followed by an older photo of him, grinning at a product launch beside Kailara. The caption read, "That trade-off cost him more than he knew." He didn't respond, didn't like it, didn't share it, but he read every comment. Cassian tried to bury himself in work, but the numbers didn't feel satisfying anymore. He had nothing to prove. His team still respected him, but he noticed it now. The way they spoke about Nestle like it was something untouchable. "I don't know how they got that onboarding flow so smooth," his head of product said one afternoon in a team meeting. "It's like the app knows what you need before you do." Cassian nodded stiffly. "They have better UX than any of our partners," someone else chimed in. His COO added, "The founder really understands the emotional side of the user experience. That's rare." They all agreed. He stayed silent. No one in the room knew he used to sleep beside that rare mind every night. Kailara didn't notice his shift at first. She was busy. Press runs, product shoots, modeling contracts. She was building her own empire, and Cassian admired her for that. She was sharp, focused, good at branding, but they had grown distant without realizing it. They barely ate dinner at the same time anymore. Conversations stayed on the surface, and when she did ask how his day was, he answered in clipped phrases. "Good. Productive. Usual stuff." One night, she sat across from him in their apartment and said, "You haven't looked at me once in 15 minutes. He blinked. "I'm listening," he said. "No," she replied. "You're somewhere else." He couldn't argue, because she was right. Narina didn't know any of this. She was too busy teaching her daughter how to measure ingredients for banana bread. Too busy folding her son's laundry while he told her about a science experiment with vinegar and baking soda. She was building a home where peace wasn't something you earned. It was something you protected. She was also preparing for an upcoming podcast appearance. The first time. She'd be speaking about her personal journey, not just the business. Her team had offered a media coach. She declined. "I've lived it," she told them. "I don't need to rehearse it." Cassian sat in his home office one night, staring at an old photo buried deep in his cloud storage. It was from 6 years ago. Narina was sitting in their old kitchen, wearing an oversized sweatshirt, no makeup, holding a half-peeled orange while their daughter played on the floor beside her. She hadn't known the photo was being taken. She was laughing at something, her head tilted back, hand mid-gesture. Cassian remembered that morning. He'd been preparing for a pitch meeting. She had packed his lunch and scribbled a note on a napkin. Something simple, a joke only he would get. He closed the file, then closed the laptop. And for the first time in a long time, he said it aloud, a truth he'd buried under strategy, success, and noise. "I messed up." He didn't tell anyone, not his staff, not his friends, certainly not Kailara, but the weight of it followed him. It followed him into meetings where no win felt complete. It followed him into interviews where every word he said sounded rehearsed. It followed him into bed at night, where silence used to be restful and now felt suffocating. Across town, Narina tucked her children into bed, then walked onto her small balcony with a blanket and a warm mug. The sky was clear. She looked up at it, quiet, content, grounded. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt whole. Everything she thought she lost, her identity, her voice, her motherhood, had never really disappeared. They had just been waiting for her to stop shrinking. She had stopped. And in doing so, she had become more than he ever expected, and everything she had quietly hoped to be. The podcast wasn't flashy. It wasn't recorded in a studio or filmed in high definition. Just 2 women, a microphone, and a quiet room inside a co-working space that smelled like roasted beans and old books. The host, Aria, was known for her calm voice and deeper questions. Not the kind that stirred gossip, but the ones that made listeners sit still. Narina had agreed after 3 months of gentle invitations, not because she wanted attention, but because she felt ready. For once, the story was hers to tell. Aria pressed record. No countdown, no build-up. She smiled and said, "Today's guest is someone who's been quietly reshaping how working mothers move through their lives. You know the app, but you might not know the woman." Narina smiled softly. "Thank you for having me." "Let's start with this," Aria said. "Why did you build Nestle?" Narina didn't blink. "I built it because I was tired of feeling invisible." The room went still. The mic caught the weight behind those words. She continued, "I spent years supporting someone else's dream. I don't regret the time. I regret that I disappeared in the process. Nestle started as something to help others, but it ended up helping me find myself again." Aria nodded slowly. "Did you know what it would become?" "Not at first. I just wanted to stop shrinking." They talked for nearly an hour, about motherhood, healing, ambition, and the myth of balance. But it was the final question that would go viral. If you could speak to the woman you were the day he walked out, what would you say to her now? Narina's eyes softened. "I'd tell her, it's okay to be quiet, as long as you're not disappearing. You don't need to raise your voice to raise your life. You just have to stop waiting for someone else to see you. See yourself." She paused. "And I'd tell her, one day your peace will be louder than his absence." The episode went live on a Wednesday. By Friday, it had been streamed over 2 million times. Clips circulated across Instagram, Twitter, and parenting blogs. The quote, "Your peace will be louder than his absence," was reposted everywhere, often alongside soft photos of women in everyday life, stirring soup, tying shoes, writing quietly at their desks. Narina's inbox overflowed, not with press inquiries, with thank you notes. Mothers, divorced women, burnt-out professionals, People who didn't even have children but had felt forgotten in some way. One message read, "You gave language to something I've never said out loud. Thank you for speaking the truth softly. I heard you anyway." Narina responded to that one herself. She wrote back, "I hear you too." Cassian saw the clip on his feed. At first, he kept scrolling, but his thumb paused just before it left the screen. He tapped it. He didn't expect to hear her voice again. It was deeper now, still soft, but firmer, still calm, but rooted. She spoke like someone who no longer needed permission to exist. And as he listened, something inside him tightened. She hadn't said his name, hadn't blamed him, but she didn't need to. The world understood. That weekend, Cassian was scheduled to speak at a panel titled "The Future of Productivity." He stood backstage, reviewing notes while the moderator went through introductions. When his turn came, the applause was polite, professional. But when someone asked, "What tech founder do you admire most right now?" the first audience member to answer said, "Narina Vale. No one's built like her." More hands shot up. A ripple of agreement followed. Even the moderator smiled and said, "Hard to argue with that." Cassian nodded, swallowed, and moved on with his script. But for the rest of the event, he barely remembered what he said. Because for the first time since he entered the world of billion-dollar rooms, he wasn't the one being quoted. Meanwhile, Narina returned home to a quiet evening. No big celebrations, no noise. She made grilled cheese sandwiches with her kids and let them pick the movie. Her daughter snuggled under her arm. Her son dozed off before the first plot twist. After they were tucked in, she sat on the couch with a warm cup of tea and a blanket wrapped around her legs. Her phone buzzed with more messages, more reposts, more praise. But she smiled, placed it face down on the table, and whispered to herself, "This is enough." The invitation came on a Monday. Subject line, "Weekend Reset, Private Founders Retreat." Narina opened it between meetings, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. The message was short, a curated weekend for 10 founders leading meaningful companies. No press, no panels, just quiet space to rest, reflect, and connect. At the bottom, Lennox Reeves' name was listed among the organizers. She hesitated, not because she didn't trust him, but because she hadn't made room for stillness in a while. She read the message again, then clicked. Accept. The retreat took place at a converted vineyard 2 hours outside the city. Stone pathways, tall cypress trees and open skies. No lobbies, no loud entrances, just fresh air and unhurried hours. Narina arrived in jeans, a linen shirt, and no makeup. She'd packed light, 1 bag, 2 books, and a journal she hadn't touched in months. As she stepped out of the car, she noticed something strange. Her shoulders weren't tight. Lennox greeted her near the garden, hands in his pockets, sleeves rolled, a half-smile tucked into his jaw. "You made it," he said. "I did," she replied. "How was the drive?" "Peaceful." He nodded. "That's the goal. No awkward hug, no lingering glance. Just quiet ease." He pointed to the cabin she'd be staying in, a cedar-framed space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a porch swing. Inside, everything smelled like pine and clean sheets. A handwritten welcome note sat on the table beside a jar of fresh ginger cookies. She didn't know who made them, but she felt at home. The first day passed slowly. No icebreakers, no forced connection. Founders wandered freely, some journaling near the trees, others sitting by the small lake reading or doing nothing at all. Narina walked barefoot along the grass, notebook in hand, but mostly let her thoughts stay unwritten. She hadn't realized how much noise she'd learned to ignore. The notifications, the calendar blocks, the constant awareness of what was next. Here, there was nothing to be next about. Just breath, and space, and time. That evening, a small dinner was served outside under warm string lights. 10 chairs, no agenda. Just food passed from hand to hand, the sound of wind moving through trees, and quiet conversation that didn't try to impress. Narina sat across from Lennox. They didn't talk much at first. He served her an extra scoop of roasted squash. She handed him the breadbasket. That was it. Until someone asked her gently, "What surprised you most about starting over?" Nerina set her fork down, thought for a long moment. That I didn't miss what I thought I would. She didn't elaborate. No one pushed her to. But Lennox looked at her and nodded once, a gesture that felt like understanding, not pity, and that meant more than words. Later that night, Nerina sat on her porch swing, legs tucked beneath her, watching the stars blink above the trees. She heard footsteps. Lennox appeared near the edge of the path, holding 2 cups. "I made chamomile," he said. "Didn't know if you still drank tea at night." She smiled. "I do." He handed her one, sat on the porch, steps below her. They sipped in silence. He didn't ask about Nestle, or the podcast, or Cassian. He asked, "Are you happy?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I'm getting there." He nodded. "That's honest," he said. She looked down at him. "Are you?" Lennox gave a small laugh. "Close. Closer than I've been in a while." They sat that way for a long time. 2 people who weren't rushing, weren't chasing, weren't performing, just present, just breathing. The next morning, Nerina woke with the sun pouring through the window. She felt rested. She took her tea to the porch and wrote a single sentence in her journal. "I feel full, not because of what I've gained, but because of what I've let go." Then she closed the book. She didn't need to write anything else. The final morning of the retreat began with soft sunlight pouring through the trees. Birdsong replaced alarms. Coffee brewed slowly in ceramic kettles. No one was in a rush to leave. Nerina sat cross-legged on a bench near the garden, her journal open but untouched. She watched the light dance across the leaves, the way the breeze moved gently, never demanding attention. She didn't expect him to find her there. But Lennox appeared anyway, hands tucked into the pockets of his cardigan, a thermos in one hand. "You have a favorite spot," he said. She smiled faintly. "Seems like it." He handed her the thermos. "Mint tea this time." "I figured chamomile might put you back to sleep." She took it. "You're not wrong." They sat in silence for a while. Then Lennox said, "I've been thinking about something you said at dinner." Nerina looked at him. "You said you didn't miss what you thought you would." She nodded slowly. "Yeah." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That hit me. I think I'm still learning how to let go of things I didn't realize were already gone." Nerina didn't speak. He went on, "There's a version of me that still performs out of habit. That still chases the approval of people I wouldn't even want advice from. You said you stopped shrinking. I think I'm still untangling." She finally replied, voice steady, "It's not a race. Sometimes we grow sideways before we grow up." That made him laugh. "Quiet. Full. I like that." They walked later, down a gravel path that led toward a quiet grove. Their shoulders brushed now and then, but neither pulled away. "What made you say yes to this weekend?" he asked. Nerina took a moment. "I think I needed to see who I was when no one needed anything from me." He nodded. "And who is she?" She looked at him, still learning. "But I think I like her." There was something in the way Lennox looked at her just then. Not admiration, not attraction, permission. They stopped at the edge of the grove, where the trees opened to a wide, flat clearing. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't need to be filled. Lennox crouched, picked up a smooth stone, rolled it in his palm. "Ever think about starting over with someone who doesn't expect you to be anyone but yourself?" Nerina didn't answer right away. He didn't push. Then she said, "I think that's the only kind of start I'd want." He stood, handed her the stone. "Then here, a placeholder. For when you're ready." She took it. Small, weightless, simple, but it stayed in her hand like it belonged there. They didn't kiss. They didn't hold hands. But when they walked back, they walked closer than before. Something had shifted, quietly, without demand, like trust entering a room and asking nothing in return. That evening, back in her own apartment, Nerina unpacked slowly. The kids were at Cassian's for the weekend. The apartment was still. She placed the stone on her desk, next to the framed photo of her children, and a small Nestle print she kept from the beta version. She stared at it for a long while, then opened her journal and wrote, "Not all love announces itself. Some love waits quietly at the edge of the clearing, and hopes you choose peace first." It was a Wednesday afternoon when the email arrived. The subject line was simple: "If you're open to it." Nerina almost deleted it before reading. But something made her click. It was from Cassian. Short, no signature, no company logo. "Nerina, I know I'm the last person who should be reaching out, but if you're open to a short conversation, just coffee, no expectations, no pressure, I'd like to meet. Not to explain, not to defend, just to acknowledge a few things I never had the courage to say. Let me know." See, she stared at the message for a full minute. Her first instinct was silence, not anger, not bitterness, just silence. She had no interest in reopening doors she'd already walked through. But that last line, just to acknowledge, it didn't sound like the Cassian she once knew, or the one who walked out, or the one who disappeared with their children like she'd become irrelevant. This version wasn't asking to be heard. He was asking to witness. That was different. She responded the next day. "Cassian, 1 hour, public place, that's all." They met on a Friday, late afternoon, at a quiet cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist. Nerina arrived first. She chose a table near the window. Simple blouse, neutral pants, no makeup, not because she was indifferent, but because she no longer felt the need to protect herself through presentation. Cassian walked in a few minutes later. No suit, no assistant, no polished charm. Just him. He carried 2 coffees, handed her one without a word, then sat. For a long moment, they didn't speak. The world moved outside the glass. He was the first to break the silence. "You look steady." Nerina looked up, met his eyes. "I am." He nodded. "That's good." Another pause. "I didn't come here to say sorry like it erases things," he said. "I know it doesn't. I wanted to say I see it now." Nerina waited. "The way you loved me, the way you raised our kids, the way you disappeared and didn't beg." His voice didn't waver. "You didn't get loud, you got better. And I think that says more than anything I could ever explain." She stirred her coffee, didn't respond. He kept going. "I thought power looked like movement, flash, constant growth. I thought stillness meant stuck. I was wrong." He breathed out, hands folded. "I left thinking I needed more. Turns out I had everything I didn't know how to hold." That landed. But Nerina didn't let it stir her. "Is this the part where you ask for another chance?" Cassian shook his head quickly. "No, this isn't about getting anything. I don't deserve another version of what I threw away." She studied him, then said, "Why now?" He exhaled. "Because for the first time in a long time, I don't like who I've become." "And you think I do?" she asked. "No," he said quietly. "I think you chose who to become. I let life choose for me." That, she understood. Still, Nerina didn't soften. Not out of spite, out of truth. "I built something you never asked about. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I needed to remember I existed. I know. I raised our kids without a courtroom fight, without dragging your name, without telling the world what you did." He nodded slowly. "And you still came out standing taller." "No," she corrected. "I came out standing alone, and now I'm standing whole." The rest of the conversation passed quietly. He asked about the kids' new routines. She answered. He asked if they were happy. She told him yes. When the hour passed, she stood first. "I appreciate you saying what you said." Cassian looked up. "You don't have to forgive me," he said. "I know," she replied. Then she paused. "But I already did. I just didn't need you to know." She left the coffee half full on the table and walked out without looking back. The ride home was quiet. Nerina didn't replay the conversation in her head. She didn't rehearse comebacks or edit her answers. She didn't wonder what he was thinking, or if he felt satisfied. That version of her, the one who used to overanalyze silence, was gone. She drove through the city with the windows slightly down. The air was crisp, traffic light. A slow jazz song drifted from the radio, and she let it play without touching the dial. Outside, people moved along sidewalks, pushing strollers, holding hands, walking alone with groceries and earbuds and purpose, everyone going somewhere. She didn't feel behind or ahead. She felt steady. At home, the apartment smelled faintly of lavender from the oil diffuser she had running near the entryway. She placed her bag on the table, took off her shoes, walked into the kitchen and filled a glass of water. That was it. No drama, no flood of feelings. The conversation with Cassian had felt like closing a file drawer, one she never needed to reopen. It hadn't undone anything, but it had settled something, not a resolution, just peace. She checked the time. The kids were still with Cassian for the weekend. The quiet felt different now. Not empty, just calm. She moved through the house slowly, folding a throw blanket, wiping a counter, opening a window to let in more light. Not because things were out of place, but because it brought her comfort. Then came the knock. Soft, rhythmic, familiar. She walked to the door, opened it. Lennox stood there. No text, no warning. Just him, in a charcoal jacket, holding a small paper bag and 2 containers. He held it up. "I made soup." She raised an eyebrow. "You made soup?" He shrugged. "I heated it up. From a recipe, which counts, legally." She laughed and stepped aside. "Come in." He handed her a spoon and a bowl of what smelled like roasted garlic and lentils. She blew on the steam, took a bite. Warm, comforting, exactly what she didn't know she needed. He watched her for a second, then asked, "How was your day?" She didn't pretend. I saw Cassian. He didn't flinch, didn't change posture, just waited. I gave him an hour. He said what he needed to say. Lennox nodded. "And how do you feel?" She stirred the soup gently, like a chapter finally stopped echoing. He smiled. That's a solid answer. They didn't talk about Cassian again. They didn't have to. Instead, Lennox told her about a messy demo day he sat through earlier in the week. A founder whose prototype glitched live, then won the crowd over with humor and raw charm. "It reminded me that sometimes we take ourselves too seriously," he said. "But people connect more with your recovery than your perfection." Narina sipped her soup. "That might be the truest thing I've heard all week." "You're welcome." They laughed softly, not performative, not flirty, easy. After dinner, she made tea. He cleaned the bowls without being asked. They ended up sitting side by side on the couch, no space between them, but no rush either. She leaned her head back against the cushion and looked over at him. "I'm not ready to start something for the sake of filling a space." Lennox looked at her directly. "I'm not here to be a placeholder." Silence, the kind that didn't need to be broken. Then he said, "I just want to be here. If being here matters to you." Narina looked away, not because she was unsure, but because she needed to feel the truth in her body before answering. Then she nodded. "It does." He didn't reach for her hand. She didn't lean into him. But when he stood to leave, he touched her shoulder gently. "You're not the only one closing chapters," he said. "Just so you know." She watched him walk out, the door clicking shut softly behind him. Then she turned off the lights, lit one candle, and sat in the silence for a long while. Not waiting, not wondering, just being. Cassian sat in the back row of a tech summit he once headlined. It was strange, watching the stage from this angle, from this silence. Years ago, his face had been on the banners. His panels were the ones everyone scrambled to attend. Now, he was just another attendee. He wasn't scheduled to speak. He hadn't even been invited. He was here because he asked a friend for a favor, a pass, not a spotlight. The keynote speaker was a founder of a social scheduling tool. Sharp, charismatic, but Cassian barely heard a word, because halfway through the presentation, a slide appeared. showcasing market comparisons. There it was, Nestle, big, bold, stable. And under it, a quote, "We don't follow noise, we follow need." Narina Vale, the audience, murmured with admiration. Some clapped. Cassian leaned back in his chair and let the sound wash over him. It didn't hurt, not in a sharp, bitter way. It just settled, a quiet knowing. The world wasn't angry at him. It had simply moved on. Later that day, he passed a small group of journalists chatting near the espresso bar. They were discussing breakout founders. "Vale is unstoppable," one said. "She's like if soft power and product genius had a baby." "Agreed," another chimed in. "She's building legacy, not just hype." Cassian took a step back, staying out of their line of sight. He wasn't bitter, just invisible. He left early, ducking out a side entrance. No one noticed. No one chased him. Across town, Narina sat in the quiet corner of a bookstore, flipping through a design magazine when her phone vibrated. An email. Subject, Essex Circle, main stage invite. She blinked, opened it. It was an invitation to headline one of the most respected international conferences for innovators and changemakers, an event she had watched from afar for years, assuming it was for people whose voices were louder than hers. But the email was addressed to her directly, not her assistant, not her team. Her, "Narina, we would be honored to have you lead this year's keynote conversation, not about what you've built, but about how you built it, in silence, in stillness, in spaces where voices like yours are often dismissed. We don't want spectacle, we want substance. Please say yes." Warmly, "The SX Circle team." She read it twice, then closed her eyes. Her first instinct wasn't pride, it was clarity. She wasn't being noticed because of a scandal, or a revenge arc, or a comeback story. She was being invited because she had become someone worth listening to, not for the pain she survived, but for the way she chose to rise after it. She forwarded the email to her assistant with a short note. "Let's talk tomorrow. I want this one to feel right." Then she slid her phone away and wandered through the aisles of the bookstore. She picked up a book about trees, opened to a random page. A highlighted sentence read, "Some trees grow deeper before they grow taller. Their strength is in the roots you never see." She smiled and bought the book without flipping another page. Narina didn't start with an outline. She didn't open a Google Doc or scribble bullets on a napkin. She started by sitting still. The SX Circle keynote was 3 weeks away, but she wasn't rushing. She knew how that trap worked, how easy it was to fill time with noise under the guise of preparation. Instead, she sat in her quiet living room, legs tucked beneath her, journal open on her lap. And she asked herself the simplest question: what do I want to leave behind in that room? Not what to say, what to leave. The kids were on their weekend rhythm again. Homework, soccer practice, movie nights with popcorn that always ended up under the couch. This time, Cassian didn't pick them up in a car with tinted windows and silent goodbyes. He came like a regular dad, jeans, t-shirt, slightly awkward small talk. He was still adjusting to the shift. Narina didn't offer warmth, but she didn't offer distance either. She offered boundaries. She offered clarity. She offered nothing he could mistake for an invitation. And that was enough. Monday morning came, and with it, a sense of motion. Narina opened a new document, not titled Keynote Draft, not speech notes. She called it Things I Know. She typed slowly, thoughtfully, without polish. "I know silence can be a survival tactic. I know power doesn't always come with volume. I know healing feels like stillness before it looks like growth. I know being overlooked doesn't mean you're unworthy. I know being forgotten doesn't mean you have nothing left to remember." She stopped there. 5 lines, and they felt like everything. Later that afternoon, Lennox texted. "Lennox, dinner tonight? My place. Nothing fancy. Just calm." She stared at the screen for a moment, then typed, "Narina, only if you let me bring dessert." His apartment was nothing like she expected. Artless walls, books stacked without shelves, a kitchen with more tea than wine. a record player playing something soft and wordless in the background. He cooked, nothing extravagant, a warm stir-fry with ginger and rice noodles, mismatched plates, a chipped mug for her water. "I like the chaos," he said. "Keeps the ego out of the room." They ate in the kitchen, no candles, just real. He didn't ask about the speech. She appreciated that, but she offered anyway. "They want a keynote," she said. "I want to offer a mirror." Lennox paused. "To who?" She met his eyes. "To the version of myself I almost erased." He nodded. "Then, it's already written." After dinner, they sat on the floor, backs against the cabinets, dessert between them. Narina's contribution, chocolate pudding in glass jars from a bakery she loved. They ate slowly, sharing space without urgency. Lennox glanced at her. "I don't want to disrupt anything. I know where you are, how steady it's taken you to get here. You're not a disruption," she said. He didn't smile. He just nodded, like someone who heard her words the way they were meant, not as a promise, but as presence. That night, when she got home, the house was still. She walked to her desk, reopened her document, typed one more line. "I know the right people never ask you to be louder. They just get closer so they can hear you better." Then she closed her laptop and slept deeply, without dreaming. Saturday morning started with cereal spills and sock searches. Narina stood at the kitchen counter, packing snacks into lunch bags while her daughter sat cross-legged on the floor beside the fridge, reading aloud from a comic book. Her son ran laps from bedroom to bathroom, looking for his missing cleats. "Try under the couch," Narina called without turning. A second later, "Found them." Of course, the calm that followed wasn't silence. It was movement without panic, laughter without shouting, a kind of rhythm only found in households where peace had been earned, not expected. By noon, the kids were off to the park with her sister. Narina waved them off from the porch, coffee in hand, hair pulled back in a low knot. No rush, no makeup, no noise, just room. She returned inside, opened her laptop, and clicked the document. "Things I know." It had waited patiently. She didn't need a draft. She needed a direction. The keynote wasn't about Nestle's growth or funding rounds or market share. It wasn't even about her marriage or the way it ended. It was about everything she had learned by not performing. She pressed her fingers to the keyboard. "I was told I was boring." What they meant was, I didn't spin fast enough for them to stay interested. What they missed was the depth, the kind that doesn't sparkle under pressure. But here's what I've learned. Boring women make stable homes. Boring women raise thoughtful children. Boring women build quiet empires. And if they call you boring, let them. Be solid, be gentle, be still. Let your life speak louder than their noise. She sat back. Not one word felt performative. She wasn't writing for applause. She was writing for every woman who had ever been left behind while someone else chased spotlight. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lennox. "Lennox, thinking about you. Not asking anything, just holding space." Narina smiled, typing back. "Narina, that's the only thing I ever needed." She spent the afternoon editing her speech, not for polish, but for presence. Every line had to sound like her. No catchphrases, no applause lines, no false strength, just lived truth. At one point, she stood up and walked through her apartment, reading it aloud. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't pace. She just let it sit in the air. And it felt right. Later, the kids returned, cheeks red from play, shoes caked with grass. Her daughter ran into the kitchen, waving a paper crown made from folded construction paper. "I'm queen of the swing set," she declared. Narina bowed. Then, "I'm honored to welcome royalty home." Her son appeared next, holding a stick like a sword. "Mom, if she's queen, what does that make me?" Narina wrapped an arm around him. "You're the architect of the whole kingdom." He grinned. "What's an architect?" She answered, "The one who designs everything you don't even notice, but that holds the whole place up." He blinked. "Like you." She didn't speak. just hugged him tighter. That night, after bedtime stories and warm showers and the long, slow winding down of a full day, Nerina returned to her desk. She added one final line to the speech. The best kind of power isn't noisy. It's the kind that makes other people feel safe enough to be themselves. She closed the document, saved it twice, then walked to her bedroom, crawled beneath the blanket, and smiled into the dark. She didn't dream of stages. She dreamed of quiet rooms filled with women who wouldn't need to explain themselves anymore. The morning of the keynote, Nerina dressed with care, but not decoration. She chose a slate blue blouse, loose at the wrists, trousers that moved when she walked, simple earrings, hair swept back low and soft. No bright colors, no dramatic shoes, no layers to peel off, just her. She stepped into the town car, arranged by the event team, carrying nothing but her phone, a copy of her notes, and a small stone tucked inside her coat pocket, the one Lennox had given her weeks ago at the retreat. A placeholder, he'd called it. It rested like a quiet promise in her palm. The conference center was a stretch of glass and natural wood, effortlessly sleek, full of industry buzz. Banners lined the walkways, each bearing the face of someone headlining the event. Founders, futurists, influencers, icons. Nerina's banner stood near the entrance. A candid photo, no smile. Just her eyes, steady. The caption read, "Power doesn't always raise its voice." She stared at it for a beat, then walked past it without flinching. Backstage was a blur of movement, microphones being tested, crew members checking earpieces and lighting cues. A staffer greeted her warmly, then asked, "Do you have your slides?" "I'm not using any," she replied. The woman blinked. "None." Nerina shook her head. "I want them to hear me, not follow a presentation." Then the staffer smiled. "That's brave." Nerina didn't correct her. It wasn't bravery, it was alignment. When her name was called, the applause was immediate, but not explosive. Respectful, curious. She walked onto the stage without notes in her hands. Just the stone in her pocket and the weight of her own voice. The lights dimmed slightly. The audience waited. And Nerina began. "I was told I was boring." Her tone was calm, measured. A voice that didn't ask for attention. It earned it by refusing to perform. What they meant was, I didn't spin fast enough, didn't sparkle hard enough, didn't collapse in public for them to feel entertained. She let silence follow that sentence. No one shifted, no one coughed, just listening. I was left, not with a scandal, not with a story worth headlines, just with myself, a blank page, a quiet apartment, and a version of me I hadn't spoken to in years. She looked out into the crowd. I didn't seek revenge. I built peace. I didn't scream. I worked. I didn't fight to be seen. I learned to see myself. Another pause. This time, someone exhaled softly near the front row. She continued, "We celebrate loud victories, but what about soft endurance, the kind that keeps showing up, even when no one claps, the kind that builds homes and holds space, the kind that doesn't burn bridges. It just stops walking toward people who never deserve the invitation." Murmurs moved through the room, not in disagreement, but recognition. Some people call that boring. A small smile tugged at her mouth. "I call it powerful." She spoke for 18 minutes. No slides, no buzzwords, just story, truth, conviction wrapped in calm. She closed with the words she had written in her journal the night before. The best kind of power doesn't ask you to shrink. It simply gives you enough room to stand. Then she stepped back. No dramatic exit, no tears, just stillness. And then the audience rose, not loudly, but fully, a standing ovation that didn't sound like noise. It felt like respect. Nerina didn't return to champagne or cameras. She returned to stillness. The car dropped her at her brownstone just past sunset. The porch light flickered like it always did. The neighbor's dog barked once, then settled again. The wind nudged leaves across the steps. She climbed them slowly, letting her body catch up with her mind. Inside, everything was warm. Not dazzling, not spotless, but hers, a coat draped over the arm of the couch, a cup on the kitchen counter, her daughter's jacket thrown over a chair. The signs of life, not mess, not chaos, just belonging. Her feet ached, but she didn't mind. She was finally home. Lennox had offered to meet her at the airport. She said no. Meet me here, she'd told him instead, where I'm most myself. He arrived an hour later, holding a brown paper bag. I brought Ty. She opened the door, barefoot, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her face still held the soft glow of the stage lights. You didn't have to, she said. I know, but I wanted to be the first to sit with you after all that applause stopped. She smiled, wider than she had in weeks. That's the part that means the most, she said. The moment after the noise, they sat on the kitchen floor, eating takeout from one container, passing the fork between them. No questions about business, no recap of who noticed what online, just quiet chewing, an occasional laugh, and the sound of two people fully present. At one point, he reached over and brushed something from her cheek. You didn't need to raise your voice once, he said softly. And you still owned the room. She looked at him, not for praise, but because she wanted to be seen. And he did. Later, as they walked outside, the air was crisp. The night smelled like cinnamon and cold earth. They didn't hold hands at first, just walked shoulder to shoulder, until Lennox gently reached over and intertwined their fingers. No pressure, just space. I kept thinking about your closing line, he said. Enough room to stand. She nodded. Do you feel like you have that now? Nerina took her time answering. Yes, she finally said, but not because I earned it, because I stopped apologizing for needing it. A few blocks down, they passed a small park. The playground was empty, but the swing sets swayed gently in the breeze. Nerina slowed. I used to take the kids here every Sunday, she said. Before things changed. Do you miss it? Lennox asked. She watched the swings. I miss who I was here. The version of me who didn't realize how much she gave without asking for anything back. He didn't speak. He just stood with her, holding her hand tighter. That was enough. When they turned back, her phone buzzed. A text. She pulled it out, expecting something about the conference. Instead, her heart stilled. It was a photo. From Cassian. The kids, sitting on a picnic blanket, smiling. Underneath, a short message. They want to see you. Tomorrow? Her breath caught. It had been nearly 3 months. 3 months of limited contact. Arranged calls. Stiff check-ins. She didn't reply right away. Lennox watched her. You okay? She nodded slowly. Yes. I think it's time. Back home, after he kissed her goodbye, she sat by the window. Not anxious, not restless, just calm. The text sat unread on the screen now, but her heart had already answered. Yes, tomorrow she would see her children. But she would also bring someone new into that moment, herself, not the mother who waited quietly, not the wife who was dismissed, not the shadow who walked through silence, but the woman who rebuilt herself, not to prove something, but because she remembered who she was. And that woman wasn't boring. She was becoming. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, both of which Nerina used to visit with the kids on lazy weekends. The familiarity calmed her. She got there early, ordered tea, sat at the corner table, hands folded, breath steady. Then the door opened. First came her daughter, now nearly as tall as her shoulder. Same warm brown curls, same eyes that used to widen at bedtime stories. Then her son, growing fast, his walk still clumsy, backpack half unzipped. Behind them was Cassian. Nerina stood slowly. Her chest ached with 1,000 unspoken memories. But her smile didn't tremble. Hi, she said gently. Her daughter stepped forward first, then the boy. And when both of their arms wrapped around her at once, Nerina's heart made a sound no one else could hear. Cassian stayed quiet. He stood back as the kids talked over each other, about school, about their new bike route, about a school project on recycling. Nerina listened, eyes wide, absorbing every syllable like sunlight. After a while, her daughter reached for her hand. "Can you come to the science fair next week?" Nerina nodded. "I wouldn't miss it." Her son leaned into her side. "Can I show you my new comics? Only if I get to read them with you." The cafe buzzed softly in the background, but her world had narrowed to this moment. When Cassian finally spoke, his voice was lower. "Their schedule's flexible. I can give you the full week if you want." She looked at him. For the first time, she didn't see the man who left. She saw someone who had built a life without understanding what it cost. "I'd like that," she said. "But let's not bounce them back and forth like packages. Let's be better than that." He nodded slowly. "I didn't know how to be good at this," he admitted. "You didn't have to be perfect," she said. "You just had to stay." A long pause. Then he looked down. "I was wrong." Nerina didn't need the apology, but it still softened something inside her. Later, in the park near the cafe, her daughter raced ahead with a kite. Her son chased birds barefoot in the grass. Nerina sat on a bench, face turned to the sun. Cassian joined her. No drama, no tension, just two parents learning to stand in the same frame again. "You're not the same woman I left," he said quietly. She turned to him. "No. And thank you for that." He looked confused. "If you hadn't walked away," she said, "I wouldn't have walked back to myself." The kids returned with ice-cream-stained smiles and sun-flushed cheeks. Nerina wiped her son's mouth with a napkin and brushed her daughter's curls back. They were still hers, not by legal order, not by default, but because she showed up. Later that evening, back at her place, Lennox brought over groceries and made dinner. Nothing fancy, just rice, grilled chicken, and steamed vegetables. They didn't talk much. She was still full from the day. But when they sat on the balcony, watching the streetlights blink on, Lennox finally asked, "How was it?" Nerina let her shoulders drop. "It was right," she said. "Not perfect, not easy, but right." He nodded. "Did it feel like coming home?" She looked at him. "I think I am home." She didn't need a mansion anymore. She didn't need headlines or numbers on a screen. She didn't need revenge. She needed presence, peace, and people who didn't measure her by the volume of her voice, but by the weight of her heart. Nerina Vale had returned to herself. It was a quiet Sunday morning. No noise, no agenda, no rush. Nerina stood by her kitchen counter, stirring honey into a cup of lemon tea. The window was open, letting in the sound of birds and the faint laughter of kids playing in the street. Behind her, Lennox was flipping pancakes. He wore her apron, badly. The tie was crooked, the front stained from a splash of batter. He didn't care. "You're smiling," he said, without looking up. "I'm realizing something," she replied. "Yeah?" She turned to face him. "I never needed noise to feel full. I just needed peace." The apartment was still modest. Her name was still whispered behind corporate doors and podcast mics. Nestle had continued to scale, and investors were circling again. But that morning, all that mattered was the man in front of her and the kids, sprawled across the living room floor building towers out of cereal boxes. Her daughter looked up, laughing. It fell again. "We rebuild," Lennox said from the stove. "That's what we do, right?" Nerina met his eyes. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He wasn't the type to give grand speeches. He simply stayed. After breakfast, they walked to the park, the same one where Cassian had once stood beside her. Today, the bench was theirs. The kids ran ahead. Nerina sat, hands folded in her lap. Lennox pulled something from his coat pocket. Not a ring, not a box. A photo. It was old. From one of Nestle's early pitch meetings. She was mid-laugh, holding a coffee, messy bun, eyes glowing. "You remember this?" he asked. "Barely." "I was running on 3 hours of sleep. That's when I knew," he said. She looked up. "Knew what?" "That you were building something bigger than code. You were building yourself back." She was quiet. Lennox didn't reach for her hand. He let her reach for his. And she did. That evening, Nerina sat by the window with a notebook. She wrote one word: begin. Not again. Not despite. Just begin. A second life, not built from spite, but from stillness, from seeing herself clearly, from trusting the quiet power she once thought was weakness. She had never been boring. She had been unclaimed. And now, finally, she belonged to herself. If you've ever been made to feel like you weren't enough, let Nerina remind you, your worth isn't up for debate. It grows in silence, in effort, in grace. If this story touched you, drop a comment. Share it with someone who needs to remember who they are. And don't forget to subscribe, because here at Mr. Charles Stories, we believe the quiet ones always rise. We'll see you in the next one.